The Bahamian diaspora spread all over the world, living and working. Thousands of Bahamians have relocated to other countries, some for educational purposes, better opportunities, marriage and job postings. Then there are those with Bahamian roots, still proud to call this country home in some way. But are we missing out on an opportunity to utilize those talents and expertise by not adequately engaging our Bahamians? Welcome to On the Record, Mission to Washington, Part 2. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Just recently, the On the Record team was in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration of President Joe Biden. It gave us an opportunity to meet Bahamians in this area. In this program, we meet and talk to just some of these people and learn a bit about their successful lives in Washington and the surrounding area. It's a wide-ranging discussion on everything from the potential of the Bahamian diaspora to the response to COVID-19. Our program begins on the other side of this break. The project really pays itself back.
Correct.
They set up
at the conference, more at the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV. On January 6th, Washington, D.C. was at the center of the world. After an attack on the Capitol building by Trump supporters, the city of the seat of government in the United States was under full military protection. Thousands of armed guards protected the city in the run-up to the official inauguration. For the Bahamians, who also watched in horror, it was a sobering reminder of the realities of the country they call home. It's a crisis like this that makes the work of a Consul General so vital. Theo Neily is the Washington representative.
At my level, I'll deal more with local government and the mayor, the Chamber of Commerce, but more importantly, Bahamians in the area, Bahamians who need to renew their passports, Bahamians who might find themselves in distress, maybe losing their passport or having it stolen or their identification while they're here, needing emergency documents to get back home. And also a big role dealing with prisoners, Bahamians being deported back to the Bahamas, meeting with chambers of commerce and advertising trade and investment in the Bahamas. So a very diverse role, but certainly very different than that of the ambassador.
I know, during times of crises, people will come forward. But beyond these crises, is there a place for the diaspora in the future development of the Bahamas in a more tangible way?
Bahamians in the area helped with the organization of that and to get the D.C. Chamber of Commerce to Nassau. And the first mission was here from the D.C., the Chamber in Nassau, Bahamas Chamber here in D.C., making connections and signing memorandums of understanding to ease business between the city of D.C. and that of Nassau. And these relationships continue throughout the United States. So the Bahamians who are actually helping us make these connections, persons who worked in the mayor's office in D.C. as well. So when you have those connections within the organizations, it's easy to call upon them to make things happen. And Bahamians, not only in crisis, but we see Bahamians are proud. They're not only not only stepping forward during a crisis, they've started, the Bahamian American associations have now regenerated and started in these cities, doing outstanding work. I continue to build relationships with them and to speak with them, to meet with them. In recent times with COVID, we haven't been able to meet in person, but we've been having Zoom meetings, and not only the Bahamas, but the Caribbean associations as well. Because of Hurricane Dorian, because of COVID, those relationships have gotten stronger. It's about networking and about building our relationships as a country with other countries. And Bahamians are very important with that. Those who remain in the United States, there are many who wish to go back home and plan to go back home. They're working here after school, so they're doing their internships and working and planning to go back home. They'll foster the relationships they've had here, they'll take with them at home. And there are many who might not go back home and to the Bahamas. They're now calling the United States home. I've met some whose grandparents were Bahamian, so they're naturally more connected here in the cities in the United States. But they're still very proud. And I think that's something we need to work on. And we see other countries that seem to be wearing their flag, if that makes sense. Even though they might be third generation Bahamian in the United States, be proud to wear your flag and to show our colors and show who we are and step forward, not only in crisis, but build those relationships. I know one of the things we worked on here in the city was working with the mayor's office to plan the Caribbean Day again. Unfortunately, COVID didn't allow that to happen, but the first thoughts of communication were there and the agreements and building upon that. And if we hadn't had COVID, by now we would have had the Caribbean Day and celebration started up again in the city. So it's the presence of letting the city governments and those throughout the United States know that we very much, small country, less than 400,000 people would be here, and we're doing what we need to.
Why is it important for Bahamians, whether they are studying in the United States or whether they've relocated here, whether it be permanently or for a period of time, why is it important that they make contact with the consulate to notify them of their whereabouts and what they're doing?
So important, and I think that's very obvious, particularly in the last few weeks and what's been happening in D.C. and several months throughout the major cities in the United States. It's important for them to let us know, to go onto the website, to let us know where they are. Also, it's important that we get communication to them, and it might not be in disasters or if there's issues in the cities, but to also allow them access of information on what's happening in the Bahamas, the new updates on what's happening with the borders, and the new requirements for entry into the Bahamas, or any general updates that we should provide them with. But it's important that we get their information so that we can send out, if there's some notice that we've gotten about something potentially an issue, a challenge or threat in the city, that we can then send out notices to them rather than going through their university, figuring out which Bahamians are at the university. If they contact us directly, if we build that database on our website, that way we can send out notices to them and let them know, please be cautious, we're getting a warning that such and such might be happening or it might be a threat in the city. And that regional, sometimes it might be a threat in another city that might not be DC, so it's important to build that database and important for them to let us know where we are so we can reach out to them and keep them updated.
Washington is also the location of the Bahamian Embassy in the United States. This is also the permanent office of the Organization of American States in the U.S. Mikhail Bullard came to Washington as a Foreign Service officer and later transitioned to the OAS in the Technical Cooperation Division.
There's an assumption, and I know I was told it sometimes, that you're abroad, you're going to cocktail parties, you're doing this, you're schmoozing, when really the role of Foreign Service officers, the role of persons in international civil service organizations such as the OAS, such as the World Bank, etc., is really to help meet the local, the domestic interests of countries through the connections that these countries can make with partners abroad. And so I think that there is some work that needs to be done on public engagement around the kinds of work and the benefits of these organizations that we're members of.
Doesn't seem as if the country is benefiting from all that the diaspora has to offer. I want your opinion on why you think that is.
What's lacking is more intentional engagement on the part of the government. One of the things that I experienced coming abroad was just how talented a lot of the members of our diaspora are. We have an incredible reservoir of talent and knowledge and skill abroad. And we're not really leveraging them as best we could, because there, in my view, could be a lot more structured engagement. So, for example, I know one of the things that the government is interested in doing is setting up a registry of the diaspora abroad. That's a first step. But there are opportunities to look at leveraging the diaspora for investment opportunities, for leveraging them for lending and debt opportunities through bond instruments. These are things that other countries are doing, other countries in the region are doing. We have an incredible reservoir of Bahamians in academia. Recently we've heard of some who have done incredibly well and been trailblazers in terms of valedictorian recently. But there are others who are leaders in their fields. And I think setting up, for example, connections with UB, connections with BTVI, connections with the government, where we benefit from the knowledge and experience that these persons have gained, is another thing that we could be doing.
There are so many concerns that people have about the direction America is headed in, least of all economics, but the continued pandemic, which obviously affects life, even race relations. There are so many concerns that people outside of the United States have about what's happening here. How do you think, or what do you think that's going to do to us going forward?
The most important issue right now, beyond obviously getting a handle on COVID, which will be important for us. The U.S. is where our bread and butter comes from in terms of tourists, so we need them to get a handle on things. But beyond that, the issues right now with democracy, I think, are also incredibly important. The U.S. Has been and hopefully will continue to be a beacon for the world in terms of democracy and how things are done. And I think what's happened recently, last week, is a part of something that has had seed sown for a while, where there has been the climate in the country certainly has fostered division. However, I think what's been most problematic has been that we're now in an age where people are able to kind of self-select what information they consume. You've had media that has taken advantage of that, and in some ways, continue to feed people things that align with their perceptions or biases, and politicians have taken advantage of that, in my view. To me, that is the most troubling issue, I think, long term, because I think it's important for the Bahamas to have a stable, prosperous U.S. It's in our interest. And so getting a handle on what led to what happened last week, the fact that you may have maybe a quarter of the country now who don't believe in democracy or don't trust the system and those kinds of things, I think those things, fundamental things, need to be addressed because it's in our interest to have, like I said, a stable, prosperous U.S. going forward. So,
what is the lesson for the Bahamas in all of this?
Democracy can be a very fragile thing, so you have to keep at it. You have to work to continuously improve your institutions, and it is important for the electorate to be, as I said, engaged and informed. Back home, during campaigns and on election day, Bahamians are locked in. I think a part of it maybe we like kind of the pageantry of campaigns and elections, but we're very, very engaged during those periods. But one of the things that I think could be improved is the engagement we have beyond election day and beyond campaigns. We have, some incredible challenges that we're facing as a small island developing states. We've had the long-standing challenge of trying to economically diversify ourselves, be a little bit more resilient, and as Dorian demonstrated, as hurricanes prior to Dorian have demonstrated, the impact of climate change and its related effects are real, and it's perhaps part of a new normal that we're going to have to deal with. Democracy is the mechanism that we're going to use as a society collectively to deal with those kinds of problems. And I think what last week the 6th demonstrated, when problems aren't being attended to, perhaps when there is misinformation, there isn't a common set of facts and understanding about what the problems are and how we can move forward, then you can have a bit of chaos. And so it's incumbent upon us to learn again these lessons, and I think if we do so, our best days can still be ahead of us.
So the project really pays itself back.
Correct.
They set up
At the conference, more at the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV. You're watching On the Record, Mission to Washington Part 2. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Thanks for watching. Bahamians have sought after and benefited from education in the United States for decades. It's also the path to relocation for many. It has also given many of our own people access to some influential and important jobs. Daniel Gibson completed both an undergraduate and graduate degree in Baltimore and Maryland. He opted not to return home and just a year ago started his own public relations firm. He's been able to put his education to use in the U.S. and back at home.
It allowed me to really explore something different outside of the accountant, lawyer, doctor situation that we try to push in the Bahamas, and also comes from a family of accountants and business professionals, so it's something fresh, something I really enjoy. And coming to school, I had opportunities to work with like Janet Jackson, Escape, Guy, and then moving over to the political arena, working on Maya Cummings' congressional campaign. She's the widow of Elijah Cummings, working in the mayoral space as well. And so it's given me an opportunity to really just flourish as an individual. I realized that I love what I do. It's led me to also do PR for a mega church, formerly run by Jamal Bryant, here in Baltimore. And so it's put me in spaces that I didn't expect to be in.
What is it like when you're working in D.C. politics? You mentioned your stint, but what is it like? That always fascinates me, but what was it like for you working within politics, within the seat of government in the U.S.?
It's interesting. It's very exciting, slightly messy at times. It could be very overwhelming, long hours. But it's like our election system at home in terms of the excitement and the hype and all of that, but it's a lot more structured. And so I had to get used to learning all of the rules that were actually being enforced, as simple as not being able to put paraphernalia in the mailbox. And it was interesting. It's been very good. I learned a lot, and it's encouraged me to now want to go home and actually represent future politicians, especially in this coming election. As you may know, every election we've had in the Bahamas since 1973, I've had a close relative in government from both sides. And so just coming here now, be able to learn from the congressional level, the mayoral level, even the DC council level, it's given me a lot of insight as to what I really want to do. especially in our upcoming election back at home and representing the next wave of politicians.
And what are you looking forward to from that experience? Because I find a lot of politicians and even aspiring politicians are very ill prepared.
Well, the plan really, is to do it from here. So while I'm continuing to learn my skills and grow myself here, use what I'm learning to help our politicians at home and trying to really prove to them that I don't need to physically be there to help you win. I've done it already. And being a foreigner, I've been in rooms where you don't have to be physically in the Bahamas to represent a client. And so my goal is to really just work with individuals one-on-one from behind the scenes. I think me being there won't help the situation. I think I would get caught up in the regular and lose track and lose focus.
What's it like running an agency at your age, and not to, I don't mean that in a negative way, but people think, when you're an entrepreneur, you're working, you have your own business, you need to be at a particular age or stage. So let's talk about what that has been like for you.
March will make 1 year, and I enjoy, like I said, I love what I do. And so it's come easily, and I've learned and I've been able to work on my skills. I have clients who are very patient, who are understanding, who also require a lot. And so it's kind of been a good and evil balance at the same time.
We are, as you mentioned, about to enter a very active political season as we move towards our next set of general elections. Do you see the events of this period? Do you see the events of the last 4 years and what has culminated in us being in this state right now? Do you see these events affecting us politically? Do you see these events impacting our politicians and even our people in any way?
I see it. I'm not sure if our politicians see it.
Why?
Particularly those who are just blind to everyday life. I think sometimes, especially our old politicians, they get into a routine, and they're in their routine, that's all they see. And so it's hard for a younger politician to come and kind of break that routine when it's been the boys' club, the girls' club all these years. However, for the younger politicians coming up, I think they're going to challenge that. And I'm excited. I just really want to make sure that we're getting it for the right reasons.
The depth of the Bahamian presence in this region is enormous. We serve in different capacities in government, business, and even some unique instances like food security. Katarlah Taylor shares her unique story and work.
I'm an events manager with the International Food Policy Research Institute. It's based in Washington, D.C. And our organization's vision and mission is a world free of hunger and malnutrition, which we do through policy research. So this is just something that always interested me as a child in the Bahamas, and just wondering, looking at in my community the things that were killing us and the ages at which we were dying and why we have so many illnesses, right? And a lot of that comes back to food and nutrition. And so the work that my organization does is certainly pivotal in understanding, and really what we're after is food security, right? So I think our goal is to no longer exist, but unfortunately the trends are not making that possible at the moment.
What kinds of things did this entire experience show that we should be paying attention to as a country?
It is in fact a global community, that we are interdependent, and a country like the Bahamas, just because of our geography and our population size, we'll never be able to self-sustain. There's no way that we can grow the food and to feed our population, but we are a part of a global community, and acting in cooperation will help us to ensure that we're fed, but not only well fed, but that we're nourished, right? So it's not just food, but the quality of the food that you're eating.
I want to talk about TEDx and what that's about.
Sure.
So feel free to explain exactly what it's about and the work you're doing with that.
So TEDx gives us an opportunity to say, look, there are Bahamians out there with ideas worth sharing to the world. And so this is a platform where we could have tried to create our own, but understanding the time and the effort to do so would not have given us the immediate credibility that a TEDx platform gives you. So every year that we've been able to host it, we bring speakers from the Bahamas, from the Bahamian diaspora, and they come together and they posit an idea. So we also had, with the youth event, the what's so great about that event is it's a fun, imaginative event designed by these youth for themselves. And we have students that are selected to speak based from a committee, and they come and they share their idea. And at the end of the day, these ideas are all posted to the global TEDx channel, which means that it's free consumption. And for the students involved, mostly, we've heard such great feedback on how meaningful it was to them in terms of getting into colleges and these sorts of things. But really, for a lot of the students who watched the event and the students who helped to produce the event saying, we didn't know that we could actually pull this off. We didn't know that our voices mattered, but when you see your voice on the world stage right beside your colleagues in the US, your colleagues in Malaysia and whatnot, it places you as a part of a global community. It places value on what you have to contribute. It reminds you that you do have something to contribute.
You are also involved with the Bahamian Association here. I have, through other people, learned about this association, but share with us what that association has been able to do in uniting the diaspora.
I'm the chair of the Bahamian American Association of the Washington Mid-Atlantic region, and we are confined to the DC, not sorry, DC, but the Mid-Atlantic region, because there are other associations in different parts of the country. We are really, alongside my colleagues on the board, we really are trying to build community with the Bahamian Americans who are in the area and also at home, right, to not lose those ties. We want to celebrate the cultural and the other contributions that Bahamians in the area are making. And we want to serve our community both here and at home.
What do you think needs to be done to harness the skills and the expertise of people like yourself and others in the Bahamian diaspora so that we in the Bahamas can benefit more from what you are doing here?
There was a survey that was conducted that showed that I think of the Bahamians that left the Bahamas to study abroad, and of course it's anecdotal, it's such a small survey, more than 50% of them returned home. But the percentage of those who returned home who were working in the fields that they studied was significantly small. It was, yeah, and I think in addition to our responsibility, which I think we're meeting in terms of the Bahamian American Association, programs like TEDx, I have colleagues that are doing other programs. I think we need to take a look at the Bahamians who return to the Bahamas and who get tertiary educations and who aren't able to then utilize those educations, because I think that is a significant factor in the knowledge loss that we think we're suffering. I think, of course, we have a responsibility as the diaspora, but I feel like we're missing a big part of the puzzle to only look at the Bahamians who haven't returned in terms of the brain drain.
The project really pays itself.
Correct.
They set up
At the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV. Welcome back. This is On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Mission to Washington Part 2 is our show tonight. Nowadays, healthcare professionals and scientists are among the most sought after in the global assault on COVID-19. And there is no lack of Bahamians to lead in that effort. Katurah Palacious, a certified pediatric nurse in the emergency department at Children's National Hospital in Washington, was among the first to receive the vaccine, and without hesitation. She provides very specialized care. The entire hospital is dedicated solely to the care of children.
Kids are going to be kids. Whether they're ill or dealing with a challenge, they're going to be kids. They're going to want to play and interact with others. So as a pediatric emergency nurse, I have to take that in consideration to provide some form of child life entertainment or activity that can help them cope with being sick in the hospital, away from their friends, away from their families. And because my interaction is with children, we tend to have to think about the whole family unit and not just a child.
Now, I know that you would have been one of the recipients of the vaccine,
Yes.
being a frontline worker, healthcare worker. Did you have any reservations about taking the vaccine?
A little bit, only because it's new. It's not that I didn't trust the science, it was because it was new. And other vaccines have been around for many, many years. So being one of the new vaccines is the only reason why I was not hesitant, but I was extra. I read a lot about it. Mm-hmm. So you did a little bit more research. You just make sure that all of the studies that were coming out were reliable, all the information that was reliable. But yeah, I was quite excited that they were able to do it as quickly as they did, and I was able to receive the vaccine.
Have people reached out and asked you about it, out of fear and concern? Have you gotten inquiries?
Yes.
What do you say when people say, well, did you take the vaccine?
I tell them about my experience. Getting the vaccine was a really painless process. The whole registering, because you have to actually get an appointment to do that was fairly easy. And the follow-up appointment was also easy. I tell people, do it. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your community. Do it for your family. It's going to help everybody if you get the vaccine. So I'm fortunate. I'm happy that I was able to get it. And I hope that everybody will soon be able to get it.
For science experts like Condra Sears, a microbiologist working in vaccine research at the University of Maryland, this entire COVID experience in the U.S. has been difficult to watch. She shared why.
Essentially, the early response was limited, too limited. There wasn't enough testing. There wasn't, I think because there wasn't a coordinated federal response, that meant that states in different jurisdictions could do sort of whatever they wanted or whatever they had the capacity to do. So it's meant that I think that, one, the rate of infection is probably a lot larger than it would have been had there been an early, strong response, and especially in terms of tracking the disease and trying to figure out when it first got into the country and tracking people down, doing that contact tracing so people would know when they had an exposure and could quarantine. And so I think it's just protracted the situation. I think now, however, the country's probably getting onto the right track where the federal government, with President Biden's executive orders, is going to allow increased manufacturing for PPE, hopefully for more vaccine doses, and there can be a more coordinated response. And also, I think getting much needed equipment or supplies to places that just don't have that capacity.
There has been a lot of departure from science. Yeah. And it is almost compromised the ability of the scientific community to address some of these issues. Do you see now with the new administration, or are you hoping with the new administration, that we will see a turnaround. And why was that so dangerous?
President Biden would have been vice president when the Ebola outbreak happened, when there was a severe flu season. He would have been a part of the administration that sort of implemented this increased surveillance for and pumping money into surveillance for coronaviruses and development of vaccine platforms that would allow for rapid vaccine development. So he gets it, right? And we know that he gets it. And I think having an administration, the prior administration, that didn't respect expertise and people who actually understood or who had the capacity to, understand what was going on, just really undermined the country's ability to effectively respond and to save lives, essentially. I don't think we would have seen, or we would be seeing, the level of mortality and morbidity we're seeing now if there was that respect for science and just letting the experts do what they do best. So it's really, it's just had this outsized, a significant impact on people's lives. And that's a lot of people who, are no longer here, a lot of families impacted, by this disease that didn't have to be if experts were just simply allowed to do what they do best.
Almost parallel to this dismissal of science has been a growing concern with the vaccine itself, or the vaccines, and almost a loss in confidence in the medical and scientific community's ability to produce this vaccine. Why should people be comfortable taking the vaccine?
The steps that people have been seeing happen, that seem to be happening quickly, we've done this before. And even the development of the vaccine itself, that was work that's been decades in the making, because of the SARS outbreak back in, I think, 2003, and then MERS in 2012, right? So we were very fortunate in that we knew a lot about those two viral outbreaks, and that this current virus is very closely related to the virus that caused the first SARS outbreak. So we had a lot of information, and we knew that targeting the spike protein, the scientists knew that targeting the spike protein would be effective. So we're talking about like a decade, at least a decade's worth of knowledge going into this development, and platforms that have been specifically designed for this kind of rapid response, because scientists have known, thought for quite some time that we're due for a pandemic. It's highly likely that it's going to be something respiratory infection. It could be a pandemic flu strain. It could be a coronavirus, because we've seen SARS, we've seen MERS. So, the scientific community has been aware that this is a possibility. It's just a matter of when and not if. And I think the community, scientific community, and the media sort of haven't done a good job in conveying that to people, or been given the space to convey that to people, that these are technologies that have been in development for a very long time. And yes, while these vaccines themselves are new, all of this didn't just come together in like 2 months, right? This is what these platforms were made for.
Realistically, when you've got a global pandemic, you've got all of these larger industrial nations, rich nations, that are all clamoring for the same vaccine, the same patent. Where does that leave smaller, underdeveloped, third world, not as rich countries like the Bahamas?
The global scientific and medical community has been having these conversations early on, and I think the pharmaceutical companies, are not going to make have not priced countries out of being able to acquire the vaccine. I think the larger problem is making enough vaccine, and I think that's why it's also important for more trials to continue, so different types of vaccines to advance to clinical trials. So the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, these mRNA-based vaccines that require ultra-low temperatures, in and of itself, I think would present a barrier to some places where if you can't maintain the cold chain, it would just be pointless to acquire vaccines like that. So the Novavax and I think the Oxford vaccines that require just regular refrigeration or minus 20 temperatures are more accessible in that regard. So I think the answer is, countries like the Bahamas have not been forgotten, and they've been thought about early on. I think the challenges now are, I remember sitting in on a discussion about how there is not enough medical glass, right? Like something that we don't think about, but it's like, it's like one thing, and then building facilities to make these vaccines, so there's just so many pieces to work around. It's not that we haven't been forgotten. It's just that there are a lot of challenges. New facilities are going to be built, have to be built. That takes time. The syringes to deliver vaccines, the glass to store vaccines, freezers. It's this massive problem that the world was just sadly not prepared for. Even though I think we probably should have been in some respects.
So the project really pays itself.
Correct.
They set up
At the conference, the school.
As a journalist, I always have to focus on the facts, and sometimes that means going to investigate for myself. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. right here on RTV. Welcome back to On the Record, Mission to Washington, Part 2. This final segment is dedicated to what I call the creative genius of Bahamians. Meet Lavar Monroe, grandson of legendary educator Sadie Curtis. He moved to the U.S. 17 years ago to attend college. After getting a graduate degree, he taught at UNC Chapel Hill and then on to Indiana University as a professor. Eventually, he began focusing mainly on producing artistic work, which led to galleries in London, Belgium, and Los Angeles featuring his work.
What I'm doing, again, bringing stuff from the Bahamas and gradually...
So these are all Bahamian things that you...
These are all my grandmothers.
Really?
Yeah, Sadie Curtis, she recently died.
Yes, okay.
And I got that entire table in the back of us and other things that I'm gathering, and again, bringing her in this. So these are just stuff that I got from my grandmother's house over the Christmas that I am just gradually putting in. And again, the painting doesn't start until this is...
So these, I guess we call additives? These are things you put in first and then... Or how does the process go?
Things that I put in along the way,
okay,
but before the painting really starts.
Okay.
And when I say the painting really starts, I'm speaking about real images that you can recognize.
Okay.
I mean, you can recognize these, but you're recognizing these from, again, a totally different space that I'm recognizing. This was my Grammy's, what you call it, the thing that she put.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that, yeah, so this is my Grammy's object. This here, and again, it means a lot to me.
So this is going to go to a gallery. This belongs to your grandmother, but for people might say, well, why get rid of those things if they're sentimental to you?
I'm not getting rid of them. These are I'm making artifacts. I'm making an artifact. So when I die, this will remain. So this piece is called Rehearsal for Reconstruction. This piece was originally commissioned by the Perez Art Museum, and it was exhibited there for 6 months.
Where is that?
In Miami.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, very prestigious museum in Miami. But it was there for 6 months, and I decided, I had somebody inquire about it to buy it from in China. They're based in China, and I decided to keep it for myself. Reason being because, first of all, I don't really own much work of my own, and it's important to do that. But it had this was the beginning of the father conversation, you know, and yeah, just have very sentimental meaning. I mean, a lot of sentimental meaning behind it for me, you know. This here, in many ways, represents myself and my daughter, but also represents my father and myself. But yeah, and just kind of speaking about what we spoke about earlier, the notion of encouragement of your kid, you know. If they want to be an artist, if they want to be a magician or whatever it is, how do you encourage those things? And in this work too, what I'm doing is I'm kind of, pulling away skin. So now we speaking about race. How do we detach race from the conversation? Which for me is also important. I think as an artist of color, one of the things that is expected of me is probably to paint someone or something that looks like me.
What do you think endears people to your work? What is it that you think that captures their attention, that causes them to purchase or display?
Well, I'll be the first to say art is the most subjective thing around. You like orange, I like to be in my painted to do. But I don't know, I think it's what we're speaking about now, like the realness in it. You know, I'm speaking about real life situations, a situation that can touch, I can guarantee you, everyone in this room. I'm meeting you for the first time, I'm meeting him for the first time, her for the first time, and I know him all personally. Everybody in this room, this subject matter is affecting or speaking to or speaking about. So the realness in the work is kind of what makes the work. Outside of that, of course, it's technically sound and blah, 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 but that's academic stuff. Like that, to me, that don't count. I'm more interested in the content of the work.
Are your paintings different from your sculptures in terms of what they represent?
I think they're one and the same. Yeah, they definitely one and the same. They inhabit the same attributes in many, many ways. For instance, the use of material. You know, so a lot of the material I'm using in the work, like the objects that I'm using in the work, are sourced from the Bahamas. So I'm going home, I'm gathering stuff, and I'm bringing it here. And with me bringing it here, in my mind, I'm bringing a history of a people outside of the Bahamas. First of all, here to Baltimore, but outside of Baltimore to the world, because none of these will stay in Baltimore. These are all being produced to be shipped all over the world. What the objects mean to me and you, to somebody else, it means something totally different. You're looking at a deconstructed Junkanoo costume, first of all. So what I did was, obviously not this year, but the year before. Do you know, like after the Junkanoo parades, people just take the costumes and throw them down? So I decided to collect a bunch of the costumes and break them down and make them into strips and form this which you're looking at now. And this is only the beginning of what they call an installation. So an installation is pretty much this along with other elements to tell a larger story. And in this work, I'm speaking about a few things. I'm speaking about a few things. I mean, one, I'm still grappling with the loss of my mother, obviously. But most recently, I've been adding other elements that kind of speak about the loss of my grandmother, who just died in December. So here I'm, I guess, exhibiting a drawing, which for me kind of, I guess challenges the way a drawing could be exhibited, or what is a drawing. But the elements I'm bringing in, for instance, the American flag, where I currently reside. When I left the Bahamas, there was a Christian cross. I left with Christian principles. I left for school, so there's a pencil there. I'm currently in the state of mourning, so there's the roses and those type of things. For me, it also speaks about travel. You know, it also speaks about imprisonment. So when this is done, I'm gonna have a professional roofer come in and put on a proper roof with a Christian cross there. So this will be a representation of a church, but without walls. And again, just thinking metaphorically, the meaning of a church without walls. You know, and then lastly, one of the most reoccurring elements is the dunce cap, which today we know as the party hat. So I'm kind of interested in, and kind of speaking about the history of those type of things, paying homage to my deceased grandmother, and also using it to speak about material in a very specific way.
That will do it for this edition of On the Record. I hope that you enjoyed our mission to Washington. We certainly enjoyed meeting and sharing the stories of Bahamians living abroad. Special thanks to all of our sponsors that made this show possible. We couldn't have done it without you. On behalf of my technical and production teams here at the RTV studios and the Moby Group who provided production services while in DC, and of course to you, our viewers, a very special thank you. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place, right here on The Record.